Alright guys, welcome back. GM Light here, and today we're going to be talking about The Exorcist 2 and 3, Deceiver, and I forget if they have a title in mind for that third movie, but we're going to get into it. The conversation's basically about whether I think these movies will still happen, whether there really is hope that we will get sequels to Exorcist Believer, and the unfortunate thing about it is I saw a lot of potential in Exorcist Believer. Now, my basic thoughts on it was, on a surface level, I was very entertained throughout the movie. I was never bored, I never really had a problem, but it's just the story, some of the writing, some of the decisions that they made. The more I thought about it after I left, the worse I thought this movie was, because there's so many dumb things. And although I think the hate is exaggerated, I completely see where it's coming from, because there's a lot of stupid shit in this. The nostalgia bait, the dumb, weird, forced political correctness, stuff that I wouldn't usually be that bothered by, and it's not that it bothered me, it's just that it sticks out like a sore thumb, and it retroactively makes the first movie worse. It pretty much falls into every requel problem that these movies tend to have. And the movie seemed to be afraid of embracing its roots. And with all the problems, with all the negative feedback that this movie has gotten, it kind of leaves the franchise in a weird place. Do we make a follow-up? Do we make two follow-ups nonetheless? They sunk $400 million, Universal did, into buying the rights to this franchise. And that doesn't even count the budgets that these movies cost to produce and the marketing for them. Now, maybe I'm jumping ahead, but I don't think that there's any way in hell they really recoup these costs. And I'm afraid that they're just gonna make generic Exorcist movies to try and do anything they can to get the sinking pennies back. But the first aspect of this I think I want to tackle is whether David Gordon Green is coming back. It seems like he's kind of the subject of a lot of ire for this movie, especially a lot of the decisions that he made, because it does kind of seem like he didn't exactly care about this franchise or making a sequel that honors that original. I'm a fan of this guy. I really like a lot of his work, especially with the Halloween franchise. I really like those movies, but it might be time for him to pass the baton to somebody else. I think that he might have to give up directing duties and kind of act as an executive producer or producer, someone kind of more behind the scenes, maybe guiding the ship, but not as directly involved. If this first movie was a lot more compelling, they could have set up a very interesting trilogy, especially with family, with Angela. Spoilers for what happens in Exorcist Believer. Now that she lost her best friend, how that kind of affects her through her life and how demonic possession kind of worms its way back into her life. There's stuff that's compelling about that, very interesting. There's a way to tackle it in a follow-up that I think could get people back on board, but what I honestly think that they might do is I think they might leave these characters behind, might leave this whole thing behind, and that might even be the smartest thing to do, because since people didn't like Believer, I don't think that they would want to be back for a direct sequel to that. And Believer could have been tidied up by things like just completely cutting the nostalgia bait bullshit. That was easily the worst part of the movie. It slowed it to a crawl. It felt so formulaic, and it's also, too, there's no real nostalgia with it. It's not like when Sydney comes back for Scream or Laurie comes back for Halloween. You don't get that feeling from Chris McNeil coming back for The Exorcist. It's unnecessary. It feels pandering. It just feels like they're applying this formula from Halloween 2018 and applying it to The Exorcist. It's dumb. It feels kind of insulting to the audience a little bit that was actually expected to work. And the movie could have been a lot more focused and developed these characters better, especially the other family other than Angela's. If they made you truly have an equal perspective of both these families, have the same amount of concerned care for both these kids, and given them both the same amount of focus, that ending could have left you guessing. It could have been truly heart-wrenching, heartbreaking. They could have made it where either decision would have been completely devastating, but they didn't do that. Instead, they kind of rushed things, only focused on Angela. They made the other family kind of insufferable, and by the end of it, it just made it predictable who was gonna die. But at its face value, the story on paper is good without the nostalgia stuff. Take away the writing, take away the nostalgia stuff, there's a good story in there. Could have been a very scary movie, and it could have been very emotional, heart-wrenching, tapped into what's great about that original movie also. And I hope that if they do a sequel, that is what they focus on, getting the spirit right of the franchise and of the original movie. I don't think that they need these characters. I don't think that they need to be doing these things. But to be honest, I'm not really sure if they are going to follow up on this. They're definitely going to pump the brakes, I think, delay that second movie, especially since this one just was not well received. And if the box office of these movies stays on track with what this one did, or even if they get lower because the word of mouth was so bad on this first movie, it might be impossible to recuperate these costs and make this work. So do I think that they're going to make Exorcist 2 and 3? Yes, but I don't think that it's going to be as originally intended. I don't think that David Gordon Green's going to come back. I don't think that they're going to exactly follow up directly the story from Exorcist Believer. And maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing, but I guess we'll just have to see how it pans out, if they'll follow up with these characters. But those are my general thoughts. I'm GM Light. Have a good one.